Today is the 11th Sunday of the year, ordinary time, as we say. Our gospel is taken from Mark chapter 4, verses 26 through 34. There are two parables in this text. First of all, a word about parables in general. It's important to recognize that this is a particular way of communicating because we live in a very rationalistic world. We don't cope easily with parables, not even with stories or allegories. A parable appeals not to the rational mind so much as the imagination. The parable has embedded within it, as it were, triggers that can awaken the imagination to depths that the rational mind cannot plumb, horizons that are not available to the rational mind. St. Benedict summed it up beautifully when he said, "Listen with the ear of the heart." So we have two parables put before us in today's text. The first one says, the kingdom of God is as if someone would scatter seed on the ground. What an odd way to begin teaching the truth of the kingdom of God. It's almost scandalous. We want something a little bit more theologically focused, don't we? The kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, that state of being which Jesus has come to establish, cannot be known in the normal rational way. Can know something. We must not leave out the rational mind, but the rational mind has become servant of the imagination. And so Jesus says, as if someone would scatter seed on the ground, would go to bed, sleep, get up in the morning, carry on their days, and the seed does something the same, sleeps in the soil, it grows, it sprouts. And then comes what for me is a trigger. Jesus says, this man who scattered the seed knows not how all this happens. He knows not. That is an affront to the modern Western mind. We ask questions. We want to know answers. Let's reflect a little bit on modern education. It's wonderful in so many ways. The opportunities are fantastic, but it does have its limitations. I'd like to reflect on those in the light of this man in the parable who knows not how, and his knowing not is in fact a blessing. It's not just ignorance. It's a different kind of knowing. I'd like to approach this through a reflection by Saul Bellow. Saul Bellow was born in 1915 of Jewish emigres from St. Petersburg. Born in Quebec in Canada. He made his home eventually in Chicago. Bellow was one of the preeminent writers of English literature in the 20th century. He won the Nobel Prize for Literature. He also won a Pulitzer Prize, many other distinctions. In a foreword to Alan Bloom's The Closing of the American Mind, Saul Bellow reflects, or begins a reflection, by referring to one of his novels, Herzog. It's a story of a man who's gained a PhD in history. A very knowledgeable man, we would say, according to our educational standards. Bellow writes, I meant that novel to show how little strength higher education had to offer a troubled man. In the end, he is aware that he has had no education in the conduct of life. Herzog's confusion is barbarous. In the greatest confusion, there is still an open channel to the soul. It may be difficult to find because by midlife it is overgrown, and some of the wildest thickets that surround it grow out of what we describe as education. But the channel is always there, and it is our business to keep it open, to have access to the deepest part of ourselves, to that part of us which is conscious of higher consciousness, by means of which we make final judgments and put everything together. The soul has to find and hold its ground against hostile forces, sometimes embodied in ideas which frequently deny its very existence, and which indeed often seem to be trying to annul it altogether. One of the blessings and the great triumphs of modern Western education is that it teaches us how seeds grow in the ground, how they sprout, and indeed how we can improve that, etc., etc. That kind of thing is one of the triumphs of modern Western education. But in that, we may have lost something. Does modern Western education, maybe particularly higher education, does it teach us about the soul, the human soul and its longings and its needs? Does it help us to know more deeply and appropriate and appreciate what matters in the end? The man in the parable, he knows not how the seed grows and sprouts, but implicitly he knows. He knows what matters.